technologies that are dominating today, they're dominating because they're able to deliver force faster, harder, stronger, smarter. So if we ask the question, what is money? Money is the highest form of energy that human beings can channel. Bitcoin is channeling human ingenuity into making it better. And every commodity is channeling human energy into making it worse. The lowbrow or the historic colloquial term is HODL, right? Hold on for dear life, or just HODL or save, whatever. And the highbrow term would be adopt as a Treasury Reserve asset.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the What is Money show. I'm your host, Robert Breedlove, and our purpose in this show in general is the pursuit of truth. We're going to explore many topics in depth, and many of them will take us down the proverbial Bitcoin rabbit hole by pursuing what I call is the rabbit. And the rabbit is that question, that all-important question, what is money? And this question is a seemingly inexhaustible generator of answers that have continuously reshaped my perspectives on the world. And I think they will for you as well. And our first episode is part of a long series with Michael Saylor, who's the CEO of MicroStrategy. Michael is the latest and arguably the greatest proponent of Bitcoin, and an ally for the space in its battle for truth and freedom in the world. And Michael is, as I said, he's the leader of MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is a NASDAQ-listed business intelligence firm. So Michael has very deep experience in the fields of technology, network architecture, things like this. And in fact, he was actually educated in the domain of scientific paradigm shifts and the impact of technology on civilization. And 10 years ago, Michael actually wrote a book called The Mobile Wave that depicted many of the impacts that he saw, say, FANG stocks would have on the world, so Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. He had laid out a case, an investment case largely for these companies and their dominance in the global marketplace. And clearly over the past 10 years, as we sit now in 2020, those stocks have been standout performers and have become, in many ways, the new dominant monopolies in the world today. So Michael has a very deep understanding of these topics that I think actually predisposed him to gaining a rapid understanding of Bitcoin. And as you'll see, or as you may have heard in other interviews, he really entered the Bitcoin space in 2020 and got very deep into the rabbit hole very quickly in the wake of the COVID global lockdown situation. So Michael's a very intelligent guy, very high energy, very hardworking, and I think his acceleration into the Bitcoin rabbit hole also demonstrates that a lot of this trail has been blazed before him. So a lot of Bitcoin maximalists have laid the foundation for others to gain a more rapid and clear understanding of the impact of Bitcoin. And in the wake of that, as you all probably know, but you may have not heard, Michael's firm, MicroStrategy, actually named Bitcoin as its primary treasury reserve asset. They initially invested $425 million into Bitcoin, and then Michael personally publicly disclosed that he holds about 17,000 Bitcoin himself. So he's got a lot of skin in the game, to say the least. And I think you'll see why as we go through some of this. So in this, what we're calling the Saylor series, we're going to start from the first principles of energy, of anthropology, of technology, and really build a solid foundation for gaining a deep understanding of Bitcoin's potential impact on the world. And Michael and I, to craft this series, we iterated on a discussion framework And we finally arrived at his overarching thesis, which he was kind enough to lay out in a very sophisticated form. And he goes very deep on the topics we've laid out here, which starts kind of very early, like Stone Age, and we build all the way into modernity. So this is a long narrative arc, but super fascinating, very interesting stuff. And clearly, it takes us some time to build up to Bitcoin, but the journey itself, it's purposeful and it's well worth it. So we've divided the content itself into time-stamped chapters and sub-chapters. We've chopped it into a bunch of episodes. Each episode is comprised of chapters, and then to those chapters, there's sub-chapters. We'll have timestamps available both in the video bar and in the description to the video. And the early episodes will include a lot of Michael talking, so a lot of him kind of speaking solo about his bedrock thesis on energy and anthropology and technology, things like this. And then as we build into modernity, into Bitcoin, it will become much more of a dialogue and conversation as we go back and forth about Bitcoin and things of that nature. So I realize this is really long form content, but I assure you and promise you, you're going to find it deeply meaningful. I myself found the feeling of chills at times. You know, there were various epiphanies I had going through this, which I'll articulate in some of the outros to the episodes. But it's just, this is dynamite content. And I think it's a great view into the mind of Michael Saylor. And it makes a very powerful case for Bitcoin and how much it's going to reshape the world. So I promise you that you'll find, despite the time it may take you, you're going to find this extremely intellectually satisfying, perhaps even philosophically satisfying. We go really deep on a lot of topics, so hope you enjoy it. And I firmly believe the insights that come out of this will actually reshape your worldview. So if this is the kind of content you're interested in and you're really interested at going deep and getting to truth, I think you're in the right place today. So with that, let's jump into episode 1 of the Saylor series here on the What is Money show. Michael Saylor, thank you for joining me.
Well, happy to be here, Robert. Thanks for inviting me.
So for a man that runs a company named MicroStrategy, you may have just executed the most brilliant macroeconomic strategy there has ever been. How does it feel?
It's been a busy quarter, I would say. Really busy. It's been a busy year. January 1st of this year, the year started out one way, and then it became something altogether different in March. And it became something altogether different again by June. And now we're in September. And I look back on it, and certainly there's a lot of things I didn't expect. And I joke with people, if I'd gotten what I wanted, I wouldn't have gotten what I needed. I wouldn't have been nearly as successful if at any point in time I got what I wanted. I'm sure this is not what I wanted when I started the year. And for a while, I thought it wasn't terribly a good thing. But now, as we move toward the end of the year, I see the silver lining here, and I'm glad these things happened, which is fascinating.
Yeah, so it sounds like the world, in a lot of ways, got a wake-up call this year, right? On a lot of different levels. And for you, particularly, it was the melting ice you were sitting on that maybe started to melt a little bit faster.
Yeah, there's two quotes from Lenin's era. There's Trotsky's quote: "You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you." Mm-hmm. And this year we launched one war on COVID and another war on currency. And so we were caught up in kind of two wars in two dimensions. And then there's Lenin's quote, there are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen.
Right.
And this was that year in both of those ways. And I'm grateful that our company is an enterprise software company. Our value proposition is we ship software to large enterprises to help them think better. And the value proposition is intact, if not even improved by all of the changes this year. And our cost structure and our operational systems, the way we operate, were dramatically impacted, and we had to adjust. But I would say this was the year that digital transformation went from being a bromide or dalliance to being something that you really had to internalize. This was the year that digital transformation really did transform you. And, at the core of your being. It transformed my ideas about money. It transformed my ideas about sales, marketing, and services. It transformed my ideas about what product offering we should deliver to the market. It transformed my ideas about the marketplace and the future in general. And it's been thrown around as a buzzword for a decade, maybe for 2 or 3 decades. But this is the year when you kind of got it viscerally in your bones if you had been dragging your feet the least amount.
Yeah, I think it's a great points there. And as if the world wasn't changing quickly enough, right? As we progress further into this digital age, it's as if COVID was just a massive accelerant on the entire process. So not only are things, transforming much more quickly now, moving to digital much more quickly, but are likely to change even more quickly, exponentially so into the future. So, with that, the theme of this conversation today is deep conversations. And I know you're a deep thinker, and I've really appreciated the media work you've been doing and the voice you've brought to the Bitcoin community. And I'd like to jump in as kind of like first principles, a look at history and what got us to today, what got us to this digital age that's changing so quickly, and where do we see it going? And I know you've thought deeply about this, and maybe we could start just at the beginning, so to speak, with historic technology.
Okay. Well, the phrase that runs through my head is there's never been such a thing as a fair fight. Humans have been struggling for millions of years, right? In order to rise, first to become the apex predator in nature. But if you look at our struggle against nature, there's never such thing as a fair fight. I remember seeing eagles fly along a mountainside. It'll home in on a goat, and it focuses on a baby goat, not the parent goat. Catches it from behind, grabs its foot, and drags it off a cliff, and then backs off and waits while the goat goes bang, 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 and hits rocks every 50 feet and is smashed to death 500 feet below, where the eagle circles down, lands on the goat, eats it leisurely.
Wow. Yeah.
Nothing fair about it. If you feel sorry for the goat, and then you realize this is not a human being, this is nature. It's not fair. Then you see lions, and it's not like one lion chases down one gazelle. It's 8 lions chase 67 gazelle into a channel with 3 other lions waiting, and one gazelle is forced to take the right side because it gets crowded out by the other 16 gazelle, and that one, bam, is dead for no other reason other than it just happened to be on the right side of the herd. And there's nothing fair about it. Nature's not fair. And when you think about the plight of man, the amazing thing is we actually evolved, right, to be the apex creature on this planet. Because a single individual on their own has almost no chance, right? Like there's that scene in Jurassic Park, and there's the bully, and he just is mean to the little, whatever, the little dinosaur creature, like some kind of small raptor, and it's like the size of a little dog, and he kind of kicks it around, and he's a bully and a sadist. And then there's the point where he gets trapped in the park, and he's walking, and he sees that little creature, and it nips at his legs, and he kicks it, and then he turns around, and he sees it's got a friend, and there's two of them. And he looks around again, and there's four of them. And then they jump on him, and he knocks them off, and then there's 16 of them. And then there's this overarch, and then they all jump on him, and he fights them off, and he gets up and he runs, and now there's 32 of them. And then you know, the human being, right? The modern American that lives in their world of shopping centers and cars and air-conditioned houses and locked doors and 911 and policemen they can call and a feeling of safety, and they look at nature through a zoo, right? And they look through the bars, and that's nature, or it's in paintings, and it's all just so romantic, right? They don't have this view of nature, the view when there's 64 of those things, and the horrifying realization that that guy is as sure as dead. He's dead man walking. He's going to die. There's not a damn thing he can do. It doesn't matter if he has a bazooka. It doesn't matter if he has a machine gun. It doesn't matter. He's going to die. At some point in the next 48 hours, he's going to fall asleep, and they're going to eat him. And that's the human condition. So when you think about that 3 million years ago, and your first question is, how do we even make it here? It's pretty obvious that in that circumstance, if you're alone, you're dead. You're going to have someone to guard your back, right? And you know, my heart goes out to the Adam and Eve, right? Wherever they were, right. You needed 2, 3, 4. You needed a tribe. You needed someone to watch, because when you fall asleep, something is going to eat you. Watch a pack of wolves hunt. The one that kills you isn't attacking from the front. You're not going to get to fight it off. It's going to be an asymmetric attack from the rear while you're asleep. And so the importance of human beings using their brains and thinking is incredibly important. And you start to figure out, how do we survive in a hostile universe? We have to figure out how we can get harder, smarter, faster, and stronger. And that takes us to the beginning of man. So if I look back at Stone Age technology, and you ask, how do we even emerge from this, incredible, terrifying scrum? And there's just key technologies that you decide you kind of like in a hurry, right? One of them is fire. One of them is missiles. One of them is hydraulics. And so there's a lot more we could talk about. But if we start with fire, fire is like the prime energy network of the human race. It all started for us with channeling energy. And when you start a fire, and fire is a chain reaction, right? Where we're releasing the latent energy in matter. We're converting matter into energy, right?
Which is like stored sunlight we're releasing, right?
Stored sunlight. You're that human being, and you want to rise above the tigers and the packs of wolves and the other creatures and the snakes and the jungle. How are you going to do that? You're going to have to tap into and channel energy. And that's why Prometheus has such a incredible mythic place. Prometheus is to Satoshi, right? As fire is to Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a fire. It's a fire in cyberspace. And most people don't realize it, but it has its antecedents, right? And fire came along first. And when you think about what it means, and most people don't necessarily think very hard about it. You always had it, right? If you're an individual, what can you do with fire? Well, you can start by starting a fire so you don't freeze to death. That's pretty useful. The fire will scare away the animal. So I start the fire. I can sleep around it and I cannot freeze. I can also put it around my camp, and then maybe something like a snake that would have slithered in and eaten me will go away. I can scare away insects and smoke away insects with it. That's useful. I can hunt with it. I can start a fire and I can drive the prey away from the fire, and if I'm smart, I drive the prey from the fire off the cliff. I wait for them to trip. I go to the bottom of the cliff. I find one that broke its neck. You ever get in a fight with a horse or a fight with a hippopotamus or an elephant? It's not going to end well. This idea of heroic hand-to-hand combat is a great idea in the movies. It's an awful idea in reality. And if you went back 1,000,000 years, you would find that your great whatever grandparent thought you're pretty freaking stupid to fight hand on hand with anything or anyone. So I hunt with it. I cook with it. There's a lot of biologists and the paleo theorists that make a very compelling argument that human anatomy actually evolved because we mastered fire. And when you're cooking something, you're pre-digesting it. And if you pre-digest something, not only do you increase the scope of the foods that you can consume, you also accelerate and you increase the efficiency with which you convert that food into calories, maybe by a factor of 10 to 1 or 20 to 1. And if you can actually metabolize the food 10 times more efficiently, your digestive tract shortens, and the energy that your body expends in order to digest food can be redirected probably to your brain.
Right?
Animals that don't cook food have small brains. Animals that a human being can cook food can have a very short digestive tract, can eat anything. We're omnivores. We can go anywhere. We can metabolize calories that are very efficient. We can eat. Only takes us 10 or 15 minutes a day to get all the calories we need. There are animals that have to graze all day to get the calories they need. So fire is critical for that. It's critical for seeing, right? You channel your fire and you can light up a cave, you can light up a camp, you can light up a tent, you can light up any area. And with the seeing comes communicating. You ever travel through the ancient world, you see they'd have all these watchtowers. The Romans built watchtowers. You put a fire in the tower, you can see it from miles and miles away. You create a signal system. A certain presumptive arrogance or ignorance amongst modern men. We think that kind of everything worth doing was done in the past 2,000 years or 3,000 years. I kind of figure 100,000 years ago, people were doing all this stuff. We might not have the writings of it, but they were pretty smart. So I'm going to use the fire for all those things, and then eventually for communicating. But once I figure that out, I can use it for hardening, right? I can cook things, right? I could harden the tip of a spear, right? I can use it to work metals, and eventually we used it to work metals, and that ushered us into, from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. Fire is intrinsic to manufacturing processes, all sorts of manufacturing processes. And of course, I give you 1,000 acres of forest, Robert. How are you going to clear it?
Sounds like fire would be the easiest way. Tractor?
In 100,000 BC, fire, you're going to burn it.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, everybody talks about, or I see these discussions, oh yeah, well, paleo man, they're all hunter-gatherers and they're just like walking around chasing after things that are running away from them. I doubt it.
Yeah.
like if I dropped you into 100,000 BC, I don't think you would solo chase after a bunch of stuff with 4 legs. I think you would start by finding a canyon and start a fire on one end and dig a trench on the other end and let a mastodon trip on it and break its neck.
It's sort of life's way to take the most energy efficient strategy, right? That's why the eagle would drop the goat off the cliff and let gravity do its work, right? Instead of trying to fight it out. And it's interesting that you bring up fire, and it's almost as if we were using it to energize our strategies in the world, right? And I think, as you put it earlier, channeling energy through our intellect. And I think the one piece that maybe we didn't hit on as much is the intellect itself develops through trade and interaction, right? That's how we are more than the sum of our parts, is by cooperation. And that's sort of at the kernel of all economics, right? We have these ideas, we swap them, they become better over time, and we get to energize better and better strategies.
The phrase, right? You're playing with fire. Be careful, you might get burned.
Yeah, exactly.
And what makes human beings unique is, as far as I can see, they're the only animal that plays with fire.
Yeah.
And from the point we started to play with fire, we started to evolve at a very rapid rate. Genetically, we evolved. Intellectually, we evolved. Sociologically, we evolved. And we talk about the fire of truth and the fire of faith. It's like, or the keeper of the flame. And the keeper of the flame really means something. If you have a city, a village, a civilization, a tribe, and you've got a fire and it goes out, you might very well die. You don't want that fire to go out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain is a fire. We don't want it to go out either. We talk about feeding the fire of Bitcoin, and we talk about feeding the fire of faith, and simply being the keeper of the flame. It was an old idea thousands and thousands of years ago. I suspect it's the difference between life and death for humanity for 1 million years. And when you've got fire, you started the fire, it's all good, but now I want you to go back 100,000 years and be running around in 42-degree temperature while it's raining on you. Or what happens when it goes to 20 degrees? If it's cold and you're wet and the fire goes out, you're going to die, right? This is it's not an academic thing. It's a serious thing. So human beings harnessed fire, and it made all the difference. And then along comes the next set of thoughts, right? If you can harness fire, maybe you can develop a brain, and maybe you'll live long enough to use it. A next observation is, you ever wrestle around with a lion or a tiger or a bear? Pick any animal that you wish to kill, and you ever wrestle with a dog that weighs 80 pounds? Not easy. Would you like to fight with one? How do you feel about fighting with 10? How do you feel about trying to run these things down? That I read about, in runners' world, right? Runners, they want to tell you about how humans were always made to run, because ancient mankind chased its prey. It could run 20 miles a day or 30 miles a day, and we just run them down until they get tired. Okay, well, that's one idea, and maybe we did. But you ever try to catch something that's running away from you while you're hungry around dinner time? I don't really want to run for 20 hours straight until I tire it to death. I have a better idea, which is hit it with a missile. And by the way, I really mean literally missiles. I mean a sling, a primitive sling, or I mean an arrow. And then I think they found arrowheads that go back 100,000 years. I mean, they're old. Most people think of a slingshot, and they think about the kids' slingshot with the rubber band and the like the kids play with. But
this is more like David and Goliath sling, right?
Yeah, if you study Roman history, and you go back 1,000 years before Rome, they had slingers. I mean, the Balearic Islands, like Ibiza, they were very famous for slingers. And if you read about them, what they'll say in the ancient text is the natives of the Balearic Islands were raised from age 3. Before they could speak, they were raised to operate a sling. The sling is about 6 to 8 feet long. It's made of animal fiber. And, throw a baseball, and you've seen highlight, right? If I increase the lever at the end, and if your arm was 12 feet long, you generate some serious leverage, a whip action. So those slings give the average person the equivalent of a 10-foot long or 12-foot long, probably 10-foot long arm. And they practice with those for years, from age 3. You can imagine after 15 years of practicing, you get pretty good. And they weren't slinging little light stones or the shit that you pick up on the seashore. They're actually forming lead bullets. Okay, everybody thinks, oh yeah, bullets are from guns. Well, they're not. I mean, people invented bullets thousands of years before guns. Guns were just the latest idea of putting bullets together with gunpowder. The lead bullets probably came along 10,000 BC. And maybe more, maybe 100,000 BC. This is a straightforward idea. If your life depended upon it, you would figure it out. And the figuring out is you get yourself a very dense bullet, you put it in a sling. You ever seen a good pitcher? A good pitcher can place the ball, 90 feet away, plus or minus 4 inches? Can a good pitcher hit you in the head if you're standing on the plate? Okay, now imagine someone that's pitching a 1-inch or a 1/2-inch stone bullet, or a lead bullet, from 50 yards away that can hit you in the head every time. Because the Romans said they could. Okay, right? Now, so now think about that, and this is how bad it is, right? We talk about this in a bit, but to make the point, these guys could stand 100 meters, 200 meters off, and from 200 meters off, they could actually hit an animal in the head or another human being in the head. And it didn't matter if they hit you in the head. If they hit you in the torso, they're going to rupture your ribs, and you may have organ failure. There's even stories, Livy, when he writes about the Second Punic War, he writes about Roman slingers, and they sling so many of these things that they pretty much break all the bones of the galls beneath their armor. Wow. If they're wearing leather armor, their ribs are broken, and if they're not wearing leather armor and they get hit, just like getting hit with a bullet in your helmet, it may still give you a concussion. They're getting concussions. It was never a fair fight. No, try taking your 8-foot long spear and having a fair fight with a wolf or a pack of wolves. No, right? A bear? No. Humanity wouldn't be here if we hunted or defended ourselves using spears or using, these things, these short, close quarter swords and clubs, they're all very romantic and they film well in Hollywood movies, and they're great for gladiatorial combat because you've got the two adversaries that are in the same frame. Right. But if you go back a million years, the adversaries were never in the same frame. If you made it this far and you were a human being, you mastered the art of death from above. Killed from a distance and nobody knew that you were there. It's not a modern invention. Not only would you stand back 50 meters or 100 meters, you would stand up. And by the way, you would be up, at the top of the hill where you have gravity working for you. That gives you more range. You would be back. If you're really smart, Robert, like if I told you there's a bunch of whatever creatures on the plain and any one of them can eat you or trample you, wouldn't you like to stand up 20 feet on a cliff that they cannot run up? Stand up 20 feet above them, wait for them to come by, blast them either with a sling or use a bow and arrow. And if you miss, what happens if you miss?
Just load up and go again, right?
How many chances do you get?
Yeah. I think.
Till you run out of bullets?
Right.
Now, what happens if you walk down on the plain with your beautiful spear and sword with all of your buddies standing next to you and fight it out?
Risk of ruin. can never take that on. I think this is very interesting, and it also highlights another difference that we have from animals. I know that humans are one of the few animals that rely on visual acuity as their primary sense. I think it's humans and predatory birds. And then it also comes down to our dexterity, right? Our ability to handle and manipulate bow and arrow, sling, these types of missile weapons. Just sort of highlights, again, kind of a difference in us and everyone else. And those two things, too, are both intimately related with speech and thought and other tool making. So I think that's very interesting.
You think about the idea of missiles, right? I need my eyes, I need my brain, I need to set up the kill zone. Oh, by the way, I left off one other observation, right? It's 500,000 years ago. You want to kill something, you're downwind from it. The sun is to your back. You're above it, and you have a missile. And hopefully you have a channel, right? Mm-hmm. If you really want, but it's like you really want to live, you're going to go find that spot. You're going to say, at this point in the day, the sun is going to be to my back. The prevailing winds are going to be blowing in my face. I'm going to be 20 feet up. Oh, there's a path up here, but guess what? I'm going to block that path because I don't want the bear running up to eat me once I start killing it, right? Then I'm going to make sure I got 100 missiles. And again, it's not a fair fight. And there's only two types of human beings. There's the type that figured that out, and that's your grandparents. Mm-hmm. And there's the type that were a bit sloppy about one of those things, and they didn't like it. They're gone.
This all calls to mind Sun Tzu, author of the Art of War. I'm going to paraphrase here, but he said terrain is the most important aspect of any battle. It's almost like the smart general only goes into battle essentially knowing that he's won based on these preparations like you're describing, right? Sun at your back, wind at your back, high on the hill, undercover, plenty of missiles.
Technologies that are dominating today, they're dominating because they're able to deliver force faster, harder, stronger, smarter. Like if you're going to dominate, how do you deliver force harder, faster, stronger, smarter? And I could think of 100 examples in history, and you tend to see those things. So if it's got the characteristic that it can be made harder, it can be made smarter, it can be made stronger, it can be made faster, there's something compelling about it. That's why digital gold is thousands of times better than gold, because you've got all those dimensions to work on. That's why the natural creature, gold is a rock, a bear is a bear, a mastodon is a mastodon. They're not getting harder, faster, stronger, smarter. They're just doing what they do. Human beings are, but only because of innovation. And so missiles are just a tool, but they're illustrative. Fire is an energy network, an energy source. It's a battery, an energy source, and you can deliver it in a certain way. And then that takes us to hydraulics, which is power from water, and water is a network. And we talk about elemental forces, fire and water, right? Well, you ever look at the ocean and what the ocean does, right? Wave action is incredible energy. But another source of energy is buoyancy, right? You ever try to pick up a 2,000-pound weight and carry it on your back up a hill or just across? Put a 2,000-pound weight on a carriage, put it on the back of a donkey, drag it on skids. Problem, right? In this particular case, can't be solved with fire. We can't easily burn it. On the other hand, if you needed to move 2,000 pounds, you put it on a barge, you put it in the water, and the water pushes back 2,000 pounds, and I can push it with one hand. And this is the mastery of hydraulics is fascinating. I went to MIT. MIT's mascot is a beaver. And we have rings that have the beaver on them. And they talk about, why are you the beavers? And the answer is the beaver is nature's engineer. And the beaver is this, nearsighted, short, waddling creature. It shows up, looks around, sees the water flowing, and what? It can just be, I don't know, bobcat bait or whatever, bear dinner, or it can do something about it. And what the beaver does is just pretty unbelievable. The beaver starts chopping down trees. But first the beaver figures out where to chop down the trees. Then the beaver chops down the trees. Then the beaver turns the trees into a dam. Then the beaver, it channels the river into the dam, creates a pond, floods the pond, or it's like it's reading the terrain. Yeah. After it's got the pond, it creates a lodge in the middle of the pond with an entrance underwater, and then it creates its life in that lodge. That pond, water is elemental to life, and that pond creates a vibrant ecosystem, and in that ecosystem, lots of things grow. Yeah. But for the most, and lots of creatures benefit. I mean, the ecological diversity improves, and it's good for all the plant life. It's good for all the wildlife. People lament the loss of the beaver, screws up forests, and the beaver is just doing its thing. And if there's a storm and the dam gets messed up, the beaver swims out in the middle of the thunderstorm or hurricane or whatever it is and fixes the dam. It's a very industrious creature. And you just kind of sit back and you're in awe and you think, wow, how did a creature figure that out? And then what does that mean to humanity? Of course, it means a lot to humanity. I've been all over the world, and I've been to the desert. I've been to Riyadh. I've been to UAE. I've been to Singapore. I've been to Miami Beach. People think oil is money. They think oil is power. They think, and let me tell you, oil is not, it's not really power. It's not wealth. Water is wealth. Mm. Water is the key to life. If I gave you $10 billion and as much land as you wanted in the desert, you can't create life. The cost for you to create a pond in the desert, the cost for you to actually create a park with oak trees. If I gave you $10 billion, you know what you would, and you lived in the desert, Robert, what would you do with the money? What's the first thing you would do?
Buy Bitcoin and exit the desert.
Spoken like a progressive. What if you, so let's parse that. What if you didn't know about Bitcoin and I gave you the $10 billion and you lived in the desert?
I guess you'd be looking for trading partners with water.
You'd exit the desert, right? So what do? You buy yourself a jet. You buy yourself a villa in the south of France. You buy yourself a yacht that floats in the Med, and then you figure out how to live your life, because the cost to grow a palm tree in the desert is $20,000 a year. You want 100 palm trees. It's $2 million a year to have 100 palm trees. You want 4 acres of grass in the desert. You have 100 million a year for 10 acres of grass. By the way, you still can't have it. Even if you spend $100 million a year to put 10 acres of grass in the desert, the sandstorm comes and it wipes you out. Right. Water is elemental to life. We underestimate how important it is until you start paying to create it. And yeah, you can stay alive in the desert, but a person making $50,000 a year that lives in a city that has parks and rainfall a temperature, a nice temperature, lives better than a billionaire in the desert.
Right.
It's just that powerful. Now coming back to hydraulics, the hydraulics will generate power, right? I can harness running water running down a hill and create a turbine, and I can create a mill with that. That's interesting. Again, back to the hunter-gatherer thing. People, if you dropped me 100,000 years ago and you said, okay, well, Mike, use your brain, go hunt and gather, I'd be like, screw that. What would I do? I would go find a stream with a little bit of elevation, maybe a mountain stream that had fresh water because you can drink it. And I'd find a big enough one that had fish in it. And then I would find a point where I could divert the stream to create a pond. I mean, if the beaver can do it, I can probably do it. I would do some digging. I would divert the stream. I would create a lock. And at that point in the year when the salmon or the whatever are running, I might just flip that lock and I would actually divert the stream into my pond and create myself, maybe it's a 100-foot wide pond, maybe it's a 20-foot wide pond, maybe it's a 300-foot wide pond. Maybe I waste a lot of the water. I don't care. There's infinite. And I would let 500 of those little fishies get trapped in my pond. I'm not chasing after them with the stick like in Blue Lagoon. I'm not there's no such thing as a fair fight. I'm not fishing with the hook. My idea of fishing is with dynamite. I'm going to blow up everything in the lagoon and I'm going to walk and pick up the fish. But in the absence of dynamite, I'm just going to divert the water. What's the flow rate of water? How many fish swim by you? I want them all. Put them in the pond. Then what do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to go pull out one a day. And I'm going to let the other fishies swim around. And if the winter comes and the pond freezes over, that's okay. I'm going to chip a little hole in the pond and I'm going to walk out every day and I'm going to reach it and grab my fish. And I'm going to eat my fish, and I'm not chasing after stuff. When you chase after stuff, you twist your ankle, and if you break your ankle, you're dying. Right? And you chase after stuff, and then a wolf pack catches you from behind, or you piss off an angry mastodon. So hydraulic power, it's the water. It's going to bring you something to drink. It's going to bring you something to eat, right? By the way, maybe if I'm worried about the little creepy crawly creatures or whatever, I'm going to dig a trench around where I live, and they're going to have to cross the water to get to me.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe I'll use water, a moat.
Right.
If I live on a seashore, I'm going to I'm going to find a natural tidal basin, and in that tidal basin, I'm going to let creatures crawl in. You ever watch? Yeah, I went to Maine once. You ever watch crabbers, right? Or actually lobstermen?
I've seen it on TV some, never in person though.
Okay, well, so if you don't know anything about lobstermen, you think, oh, well, these are guys out hunting lobster with a trap. Okay? When you go watch the lobstermen operating, you realize they're not hunting lobster. They're not catching lobster. They're farming lobster. Okay? Big difference. They drop the trap, and they'll create a trap. They'll put some kind of herring or something in the trap, what the lobster wants to eat. They drop it. They put 10 of those cages down. They wait. Lobsters are lazy. Lobsters crawl into the cage. They grab the food. They get stuck in the cage. They pull the trap up. They find a big lobster. They keep that one. They find little lobsters. They throw them back in because they need them to keep growing. They're creating agriculture to feed the lobster. The lobster's living in happy lobster hotel its entire life. It's not so bad, Robert. If I said to you, I'm going to give you like free room and board to age 70, and then I'm going to eat you. Well, not so compelling. Not so compelling. But if I said to you, Robert, I'm going to give you free room and board until you're 750 years old, and then your life is going to end. Or you can make it on your own and you'll suffer a horrific death being eaten up by a barracuda at age 35. You might think it's not so bad living, in your lobster hotel 10 times longer than you would live naturally. It's not like these lobsters would have made it very far. They're liking it. They're domesticated lobsters.
Right. Nature tends to pursue the most energy efficient strategy available to it, right? Whether you're the eagle dragging the baby goat off the cliff, or you're the lobster enjoying the lobster hotel, or you're the man diverting the stream to capture a bunch of salmon, you have a tendency to want to do the least but achieve the most, right? It's kind of the nature of productivity itself.
I'm channeling energy.
Yeah. And not wasting any in the process, channeling it as efficiently and usefully as possible.
The pyramids got built 2,000 years before Cleopatra and Caesar. How'd they haul it up there? And some of the most fascinating videos I've seen on YouTube are those YouTube videos that show how they build hydraulic elevators to move a 2-ton or 4-ton stone up by floating it, up a channel to the side of a pyramid. And I totally believe that's how they did it. They actually used hydraulics to construct the pyramids. It makes
I haven't seen that actually. I've always seen them rolling them on the logs. How were the hydraulics constructed?
You have a tube of, let's say you have a tube of water. If I put something in the bottom of the tube that's lighter than water with a float attached to it, I put a rock with a float. Maybe you take animal skins and you blow them up with air. It will float up the tube and pop out the back. All you got to do is have the tube be able to hold the integrity. So I can't do it for 1,000 feet, but I can do it for 20 feet. It's like the way a lock works in a canal. Okay. Like I'm going into a lock, I close the gate, I flood the lock, it lifts the barge, gotcha. I open the other locks, and I go out. So imagine a series of locks that I use to actually lift 100,000 tons of stone using water.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like very, very interesting. Yeah, I think that's how it was done, in my opinion. But water can be used for farming, for fishing. It can be used for security. It can be used for sanitation. In fact, there's without understanding water and the dynamics of water, there is no cradle of civilization in the Aegean or anywhere. And I'll give you another interesting vignette. I go to Santorini. And Santorini's built up on this caldera, looking down on the Aegean.
Beautiful white city, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful city.
It's gorgeous, yeah.
Okay, well, in the 20th century, you can take the elevator up. So I take the elevator up from the port, and the city is 500 feet above, or some number of feet above. And then on the way back, I see donkey rides, and you can take a donkey up. You can take a donkey up to Santorini from the port, or take a donkey down. I'm like, I was in my fitness craze, and I'm like, well, I'm not riding a donkey down, but I think I'll just walk down. I mean, what's the problem? I think I can walk. I don't need to take the sissy elevator. So I start walking down these steps, and the steps aren't terribly difficult. What do you think I see as I'm walking down the donkey steps?
Donkey do?
How much of it do you think I see?
Probably more than you wanted to.
A river?
Wow.
A river of donkey excrement. Mind you, this is like 3 or 4 tourist donkeys taking down the occasional tourist. A river of donkey excrement. And you can hardly avoid it. You're hopping this way and that way. And then my brain starts working. And I start thinking, what happens if there's 100 times as many donkeys? And what happens if they're walking through a city? And what happens if it doesn't? How do you clear this stuff? It's not like they had hydraulic hoses and they could just clean. By the way, They're not clearing it in the 21st century in Greece. It's a river of donkey crap. I mean, they haven't figured out how to clear it 3,000 years later. So let's go back 3,000 years and let's do the thought experiment. What's it like to live in a city using animal power to move stuff around?
Dirty place to live.
Awful, but also unsanitary. I mean, fly infested, typhus infested, typhoid,
Right.
Germ infested. And then when it gets dry and this stuff desiccates and it blows through the air, you're going to be breathing it, smelling it. It's going, it's just going to be awful. So you want to drink it and eat it? Okay. This is not just a matter of creature comfort. You're going to die. You can't actually bring together a bunch of human beings unless you work out the sanitation problem. And it was then and there that it dawned on me very viscerally. There's a reason why all the streets in Mykonos are so narrow that you can't get a horse or a cart through them. They're walking cities. By the way, there's a reason that equus and the equestrian class were the Roman knights. The knights were the equestrian class, and what it meant in ancient Rome was the top 1% or the top 0.1%. The nobles of Rome were the equestrian class. What it meant to be rich and powerful was you had the right to bring a horse into the city. Nobody else could. The problem was not they couldn't afford the horses. The problem is if they allowed anybody to bring a horse into the city, it would be so unsanitary as to render the city uninhabitable. So most ancient cities, if you wanted them to work, you would have to have them human powered. And now you've got this dilemma of how do you move goods around? Tell me, how do I move things around cleanly? I need a clean energy source that is not going to foul my sanitary system, that is not going to actually kill me. And of course, it's a boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want? You want 25 cities with ports on an inland sea with at least a season, six to 9 months a year, where you can cross from one point to another point without being dashed and killed on the rocks. So you need a fairly mild sea, but you have to have water, because if you have the same 25 cities on land and you're going to use horse or animal power in order to move goods and services back and forth, it's just so dirty, right? So unsanitary that your civilization is probably not going to get off the ground. And so
the Mediterranean was ideal for this, sounds like.
The Mediterranean is the perfect ocean.
No.
Because you can oftentimes navigate without leaving the side of land. It's hard to get too lost. There's a lot of ports.
Very placid, relatively.
And there's a lot of stops. If you look at all of these empires, the Phoenician Empire, the Roman Empire, the Venetian Empire, the British Empire, if you actually tour all the great ports in the Mediterranean, all the really good ones, the story goes something like this. Maybe you go into Bonifacio in Corsica. Well, in 1000 AD, this was a Phoenician port. And then the Greek Empire came along and it was an Athenian port, 500 AD. And then the Carthaginians kicked them out and it was Carthaginian port. And then the Romans kicked them out and it was a Roman port. And then after the Romans fell, the Venetians took this over, this Venetian port. And then eventually it became a British port, Like that's the story of Malta. That's the story of Corfu. That's the story of, of lots of different ports in the Mediterranean. And the reason why is if you want to dominate the Mediterranean, you need to have a port within 1 or 2 days sail that you can hide in whenever the mistrals blow. And if you control that network of ports, when the weather goes bad, you go into the port and your ship doesn't get sunk. And if you don't, and you're like a week away from a port that's friendly, and the weather gets bad, you get dashed against the rocks and you just die. And that's the end of it. And so these are all nautical networks. And